Hi guys, welcome back to Yarntopia's weekly crochet tutorial. This week, like I said in the earlier post, is all about granny squares. Granny squares are fantastic because it's only one stitch, there's very few instructions to remember, especially when you're first starting out, and you can do absolutely all sorts with granny squares. You can make blankets, you can make scarves, you can turn them into bags. I've actually made a vest top out of granny squares before. There's absolutely loads of different variations of them. You can get them with motifs in the centre. Absolutely tons out there for you to go and have a look at. So what I've done today is I've picked two of my favourites, which is the traditional granny square, which is this guy here, and then a solid granny, which is this one. And depending on the look that you're going for your project, there's something to suit everybody. They do both use the same stitch and a very, very similar pattern, and they are really quick and easy to build up. You can do them in any size you want. They don't have to be little. So this size is sort of more of a traditional granny blanket size, and you'd make a lot of these and then sew them together and make yourself a big blanket. If you don't want to do that, because it does take ages, you can do this and keep going until you've got a lot bigger square. So the blanket that I made my daughter for her bed only has 6 large granny squares in its construction. So you can play about with sizing and patterning. You can play about with colours. You don't have to do them all in one colour. You could do a different colour for each round and make them stripy. You could do blocks of colour. You can alternate. You can do absolutely anything. One thing that they are brilliant for is using up all those little odds and ends that you've got from other projects. They don't take a lot of yarn at all. So we're going to start with the traditional granny square, and we're going to look at how it's constructed. So if you want to grab yourself a hook and some yarn, bonus with these is you can do them in absolutely any type of yarn you want and just use the corresponding hook. So again, because it's my favourite, I've got my trusty 4mm, and I'm just using a double knit yarn. So there's 2 ways to start these depending on what you're comfortable with. So you can start with just a chain. So you start with your slip knot. And you're going to chain 4. And then work all your stitches into the first chain. This chain 3 would count as your first double crochet, and you would work every other stitch for the starting round into that first chain there. Me personally, I tend to start all my projects that start in the centre with a magic ring. Some people find this really tricky to get to grips with. Some people just can't do it. That's absolutely fine. You can use that chain 4 technique that I've just mentioned. If you do already know how to do the magic ring, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to try and show you the method I use and see if you guys can follow it on. So I just start with my tail end. Wrap my yarn around just my first 2 fingers, so that you end up with a little cross, so that when you turn your hand over, you've got 2 little parallel lines. Holding it is what I found most people have the biggest problem with. And then you just go under your first one, grab the second one, pull it through, and give it a twist. And then when you take your fingers out of the loop you've made, just make 1 little chain stitch, and that will hold it all together. And it gives you this big loop that you can work all your stitches into for your starting round. One of the other ways that you can do it is to start making your slip knot. And then instead of pulling completely tight, make a chain 1, and that will give you this ring to work in like before. I usually do the wrapping it around my fingers technique just because it gives me a little bit bigger of a ring to start working in. Either's fine, any way you do it, absolutely up to you. It's just I find the magic ring a lot better for centre projects. You can close the hole up in the centre so much tighter and neater for me. That's why I prefer the magic ring technique. You don't end up with a big hole in the middle. So for the first round of the granny square, like showing you the chain technique, you want 3 little chain stitches from your centre, and that's going to count as your first double crochet. And with a traditional granny square, it's done in clusters of 3 double crochets. So this is going to count as our first one. So we're going to do another 2 double crochet into that centre ring. And that's our first granny cluster complete. Now, you will find when you're looking at patterns that a lot of people have different ways of making their granny squares in terms of how many chain stitches they use, if they use chains in between the clusters, how many chains they use on corners. This is just my preferred method. This isn't the only one. There are lots of different options, so don't worry if you find a pattern that has different numbers to what I'm showing you. This is just my preferred method. So what I do next is I chain 2 for my corner space, and then I repeat this 3 double crochet cluster. So I'm going to do 3 double crochet into the ring. One, two, and 3. And then I'm going to repeat this chain 2 for my next corner. And we're going to repeat that process until we've got 4 clusters and our 4 corner chain 2s. So I've got 1 cluster and 1 corner, second cluster, second corner. So we're just going to repeat that. So that's our third cluster, chain 2 for our third corner. This is our last cluster. And our last chain 2 for the last corner. Let's get some more yarn. There we go. So what I do now is close up this centre a little bit. So just that loose tail in there, we're just going to give it a pull. And that's just going to start to close our middle up. And then we find the top of the chain 3 we made right at the beginning. That's this one here. So 1, 2, 3. And we're just going to insert our hook into there and make a slip stitch. So that's just grabbing the yarn, pulling it back through your work and pulling it through the loop on your hook. So that is round 1 finished. You should have 4 clusters of 3 double crochet and 4 corner spaces, which were our chain 2s. Now this again is where a lot of patterns differ on how you start your following rounds. As I say, this is just my method of doing it, so don't worry if you find a pattern that does it slightly differently. So we're just going to chain 3, and then we're going to move straight across to this next corner, and in the corner we're going to do 1 cluster, chain 2 and a second cluster all into this corner. So our first cluster, 3 double crochet, 1, 2, 3, our chain 2 for a new corner for this round, and another cluster of 3 all in to that same space. And this is what you should have. So what we're going to do is we're going to move straight over to our next corner, and we're going to repeat that. So that's our 3 for our first cluster, a chain 2 and another cluster of 3 double crochet. And we're going to repeat it again over in the next corner. And now we're at our last corner, and this one we do just a tiny little bit differently. So we're going to do our first cluster, which is 3 double crochet. So 1, 2 and 3. We're going to do our chain 2, and this time we're only going to do 2 double crochet. The reason for this is because the starting chain 3 we made at the beginning of this round, which is this little guy here, actually counts as a stitch. So on this round it counts as the last stitch of where we are now. So all we're going to do is we're going to find the top of that chain 3, so 1, 2, 3. We're going to pop in our hook, and we're just going to slip stitch it together. And that pulls this chain 3 up into place as the last of our 3 stitches in this cluster. And that is what you should have at the end of round 2. Round 3, we're going to do almost the same thing, but we're going to be adding clusters into these spaces in between our corners. So just like before, we're going to start with a chain 3, and that's going to count as our first stitch. So in this space below us, we're going to do 2 more double crochets. Just like that. So we've now got 3 stitches in this space. Now the next space for us is a corner, so we're going to repeat what we did in the last round. So a corner is a cluster of 3 double crochet, a chain 2 and another cluster of 3 double crochet all in to that corner space. So there's our first cluster, our chain 2 and our second cluster. And now we're working along the side of our square, and we have this space right here. And in that space, we just do 1 cluster of 3 double crochet. Like so. And that on this round then puts us back to our next corner. So I'm going to work my way back round, doing 1 cluster, chain 2 and another cluster in each corner space, and a cluster of 3 in the spaces along the edge. I will meet you when I get back round to my last corner. Right guys, so I've just whizzed round and finished off that round, and I'm just about to join it up to our starting chain 3. Sorry about that guys, I'm still getting used to having a tripod in between me and my hands for filming these tutorials, which is a bit strange, and I keep knocking it over. I'm really sorry. I am going to have to do some more practice at crocheting in front of a camera. So as I was saying, I've whizzed around that row back to where we started, and I'm just about to slip stitch into my starting chain 3 to finish off this round. Just like that. So just a quick recap on the next round. So chain 3 starts each round, and in this case this would be my last stitch for this space. So I'm going to do my chain 3, and then I would move straight on into the next space along the row, and in these spaces on the side we're just doing 1 cluster of 3 double crochet. When we get to the corner, this would be a cluster, a chain 2 and a second cluster, which would turn us round onto this side. We've got 2 spaces, so we'd put a cluster in each of those spaces and then back to our corner, and we rinse and repeat that process all the way back round, row after row. So in every corner we're going to do a cluster of 3, a chain 2 and a new cluster of 3, and in every space in between we just put a cluster of 3, and you can keep going with this until it is as big as you want it to be. If you want to change colours, you can do that one of 2 ways. So you can fasten off here when you get to the end of a round, and then you can just join in to the space your new colour, and again start with a chain 3, finish off the cluster and then move on to the next one. Or you can change colour just before your slip stitch by adding on a new loop onto your hook and using that colour to pull through your slip stitch, and then fastening off your old colour afterwards. There's lots of different techniques for colour changing. It's up to you where you change colour, it's up to you if you even want to change colour. But that is a traditional granny square complete. So we're going to move on and we're going to look at the difference with a solid granny square. So a solid granny square, which is this one, has the same starting round as a traditional granny square. So it has these 4 clusters of 3 double crochet separated with a chain 2 corner. So it's exactly the same as what we did for this one. The difference is in how we build the new rounds. So once you've got that starting round and you've joined it at the end, we have the same beginning of the round, chain 3. And instead of moving into our spaces, we actually work in the top of our stitches. So we've got 3 double crochet here. So this chain 3 counts as our first one. So we're going to move over to the top of the next one, and we're going to put a double crochet in the top of that stitch. And then we're going to do the same in the top of the next stitch. And that brings us across to our corner. So there's a slight difference in these as well. So in these corners we're only going to place 2 double crochet, and then our chain 2 for a new corner, and then we're going to place another 2 double crochet into that corner space. Now what we do on this one is we work along the row in the top of each stitch. So we've got 3 double crochet here. Now sometimes the top of this first one can hide itself a little bit under what you've just done. So you can just sort of move it with your fingers a little bit and you can see the top of that stitch right there. So that's where our first one is going to go. So we're going to do 1 double crochet in the top of the next one, and in the top of the next one. And now we're back at a corner space, so that's going to be 2 double crochet, chain 2, and 2 double crochet, all in that same corner space. And then that brings us back to our side, and we're just going to repeat that process again. So we're going to place 1 double crochet in the top of each stitch, and then our corner is going to be 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet. And then we're going to repeat the same thing for our last side. So 1 double crochet in each stitch along, and then 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet in that last corner. And then just like with our other granny square, all we're going to do is we're going to find the top of our chain 3. So 1, 2, 3. We'll pop our hook in there, and we're going to join it together with a slip stitch. So with every round after this, it's the same process. So we're always going to start with a chain 3, and that is going to count as our first stitch. We're going to place 1 double crochet in each stitch until we reach the corner. In the corner, we're going to place 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet, and then we're going to put 1 double crochet in each of these stitches all the way along until we reach the next corner. And you're going to keep repeating that all the way around until you get to this last corner. If you guys want to go ahead and do that, I'll be right back with you. I'm just going to speed round and finish that to the corner. So I've just whizzed round and finished off that round, and as you can see, I've just done the last corner. So you will have a space, you will have a couple of stitches left, and this will be the same on every other round that you do, just because of where we started. So you just do 1 double crochet in each of these last couple of stitches you have. Find the top of your chain 3 and just slip stitch together. So that's it, that's your solid granny square. Don't worry if, like mine at the moment, it looks like it's curling up a little bit. You're constantly moving it around, you're constantly moving it in your hand. It is going to bend, it isn't going to stay perfectly flat. But what you will find is once you're done and you just pop it down and smooth it out, it will lay flat. So again, these you can make as big as you want. You just follow that same process. So just a quick recap. You start each round with a chain 3, and that counts as your first stitch. Place 1 double crochet in each stitch along to your corner. 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet in the corner, and then repeat 1 stitch in the top of every stitch down your side. 2, chain 2, 2 stitches for your corner, and repeat all the way around. You will have a couple of double crochet here on each round that you need to fill in to meet back where you started, and then you just join to the top of your chain 3 with a slip stitch and move on to your next round. Again, if you want to change colour, this would be the place to do it. Once you've joined a round up, this would be the best time to swap colour. And then start with the chain 3 and carry on as you have done before. It's completely up to you how you customize these, what you turn them into. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I've seen so many different things made with granny squares. Get yourself on the internet, have a look around, see what you can find. Make your own designs up, get creative. If you do make any of these, if you do make anything with granny squares, feel free to drop a picture in the comments for the video. I'd love to see what you guys are working on. And don't forget, keep your eye out on the Yarntopia Facebook page for what next week's tutorial will be. Thanks guys, stay safe.